student at the University of Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, where I'm pursuing a PhD in development economics. Thank you.
My name is Reva Irombo. I work at Africa Policy Institute. I am a researcher and the event organizer for Africa Policy Institute.
Masika and Ondigi, Justus Ondigi Onyango, who will be joining us, plus others we have invited take part. We intended this team to be a very small, close team. In fact, we were asking for a round table more so because we, out of our circle, we invited about 12 people now, plus our team. So I'll be talking about the purpose of this meeting. But let me start by introducing myself and also the entity that has invited you here. I must say that I'm Peter Kagwanja. I don't have as many titles as my brother to the right. And I have pretensions of an academy. I like notes. Ali Mazuri, who Professor Piero Lumumba and I admire greatly. We quote him from time to time because of his wisdom. He told us that an intellectual is the one who just fall in love with knowledge. You don't have to have any other qualification. Because every one of us is in the process of learning. Every day you learn something new. But what makes you an intellectual is that you have a very deliberate love affair, serious love affair with knowledge. And that's what we do. Mary, I don't know why you are laughing, but we will have this discussion outside this sitting. So I do describe myself as a public intellectual. And as public intellectual, it's very deliberate. Because you want to tell the young people who are going to school that sitting at the university, doing your papers, and doing everything you do is not enough. You need to impact on society now. I know we talk about basic research, which Mahamud Mamdani and others like very much, basic research. But you have to help people on a day-to-day basis move to the next stage. That's why before I came here, I was a citizen, talking about the killings. And now I'm here. Yes, I was here. I was the guest. I was one of the guests at Citizen this morning for 2 hours. Now, so the point therefore here is that I would describe myself as a public intellectual. Basically, I teach at the University of Nairobi. I've been teaching there for 15 years now. At the we used to call it the Institute of Diplomacy and International Studies. Now it is the Department of Diplomacy and International Studies. At that university, immediately I left the Kibaki government. I went to the institute, now the department. Because of this kind of work I do, I asked the chair to allow me to work with people I can work with even in my office, at master's and PhD. And it reached a level where now I teach one course. And I've done that for 5 years, which is science and technology in international relations. So that's what I've been teaching. I supervise PhDs again on matters related to international affairs, conflict, and also technology and the other things we do. Beyond that, then I head the Africa Policy Institute. I must say I also teach at the National University of Defense, Kenya, or National Defense University. Again, that I've been there for now about 10 years. Because they started as a college, and now they are full-fledged university for the last 4 years. So, so I teach there. I teach national interests and national security, the interface. That's the course I've been teaching throughout for them. So here at Africa Policy Institute, I fulfill all the ambitions I have, just in case I don't achieve them before the Creator comes. So I'm called here President, and the founding President and the CEO. That can tell you what ambitions I have. But even if I don't achieve them, at least I have been the, the president of API for I've been the president of API since 2007. So we are almost talking about almost 20 years. So I've been in the presidency longer than President William Ruto. Yeah, so I've heard the institute from scratch. Let me say something about the institute before possibly handing over to my brother, Ken Ombongi, to also talk about this particular initiative. We started Africa Policy Institute in 2006 in Pretoria, South Africa. By we, I mean a team of Pan-African thinkers from across the countries, and we gathered there and thought that we needed something, an institute that would think Pan-African. I was agitated by the fact that I was working for a major international think tank, International Crisis Group. And every time I did a report, I was asked to say what the United States will do in Africa, what European Union will do, what the United Nations specific department would do, what the Commonwealth will do. Nobody asked me what Kenya will do, what the East African community will do. From time to time, they would reluctantly say what the African Union can do. But it was very, very specific. And I thought that from that point, the African agency was not clear. So we created the Africa Policy Institute. And if you look at how we describe ourselves, we start by saying we are a Pan-African think tank. So that you don't make a mistake or even accuse us of being biased. We are a Pan-African institute. And we look for solutions to African problems. We have never pretended that we want to find solutions for the world, because there are many people looking for those solutions from where they are. But for us, we are for Africa. So that's why we also registered ourselves as Africa Policy Institute. Not Kenya, not Europe, not anything that way. Now, since that time, we have grown. Professor Lumumba, I know what you mean when you say we are not funded, because we took a policy of not seeking any funding from any institution that would tell us what to do. And luckily, all the funders found a way of working with us. So they give us consultancies. And we do our work. And then we give them what we have come up with. They don't tell us what we are doing. They don't tell us how to do it. They don't come to our offices to audit us or to look at our books. Nobody comes to our place. At least my young man who ran the institute for me, when I'm away, will tell you that. Nobody. And therefore, we are as independent as such. We have partnerships with USID. We have partnerships with the what do they call this, British, the FID. We are major consultants for the UN, for IGAD, for East African Community. We are part of the leading think tank consulting with China. We are also a think tank that is consulting with the State Department from time to time. They give us consultancies directly through the Africa Center for Strategic Studies. And many more, including African governments. Rwanda from time to time would come and want to know this. They give us consultancy and we do it. And we do it overboard and we say we are publishing it. It's not that we're doing it secretly. Whatever we are finding, I'll do it on my Sunday article at The Nation, and we're also going to have it on the table. That's how we work. Because the world of knowledge can be very tricky. You can be serving other people with knowledge, and then you are accused of X, Y, Z. Africa Policy Institute, beyond its ideological commitment to Pan-Africanism and African solution to our problems, is organized around the themes that are relevant to Africa. And the way we work, we don't work on programs. Programs are the ones that are funded by donors usually. we work on the basis of the centers. And these centers, if you wish, the centers of excellence. So we have the Horn Center, which help us to deal with the Greater Horn from Congo, the 8 countries of the East African community. You can add there Ethiopia, Djibouti, and now Somalia is in the community, and Eritrea. We also now move to Congo, the DRC Congo. Sometimes we deal with Central African Republic if it's necessary. And we also deal with Egypt because of its impact on us. Almost all the countries that are on the Nile, because they touch on us. So we also deal with them from the Horn Center. The Horn Center is our area of empirical studies. It is where we measure our achievement in terms of basic fundamental research. The other thing we are good at in the center, Karibuni. Prof, Karibu sana. We are just starting. So the other basic thing we are good at is the China-Africa studies. And we have, Pete, you'll introduce yourself in a short while after this. But the gentleman who has come is not your usual, gentleman. He's a very eminent professor who has many people who has gone through his hands. He's like me. He's also a public intellectual, but in a different way, and so on. But we'll be talking about that. So we are organized around those centers. We have distinguished expertise in the China-Africa studies. Actually, to be honest with you, we are among the 3 top think tanks working on China. And if 2 are called, I'm sure we would be part of the 2. If we are not, we would be very frustrated. But we know for sure that we are part of the top 3. We are more prominent because we do not only do research, but we also publicize our research and have a very active, communication strategy on Chinese matters. And as a result, what we have is that our Center for China Africa Center is one of the best known now. Not only in terms of what you could call, that it is doing China, but publication. We insist on publishing. So, like this year on, we have a whole book on the power of minerals, and so on. Today, we have just, as we speak, a working paper is coming out on what we are calling the, standard gauge railway economic network, economic belt. It's a belt. And again, we do empirical research. We publish a monthly report on monitoring, which is the China-Africa report, based on research by our observatory on China-Africa studies or activities development. So Ken has said he deals with our climate center. So climate change is a big issue. So Ken, who is a scientist, among us, Ken Orengo, is a person you know. Ken Orengo heads that for us, besides being assistant to myself in the institute. So let me talk about the centers there, because that's essentially what we're doing, and then come to this one. The bridge is the center. Last year, we created a center for presidential studies. Last year. The Center for Presidential Studies is a partnership between us and the Department of History at the University of Nairobi. So we have an MOU between Africa Policy Institute and the Department of History and Archaeology at the University of Nairobi. And this project is a project that Africa Policy Institute has, but which is executed in partnership with the University of Nairobi. Peter, we decided that we are going to have the first facility for postdoc postdoctoral studies. So all the students who had done their doctorate at the University of Nairobi, the department, were co-opted into this project as part of their postdoc work. And Ken and I have been very, very conscious of just doing that, inducting them, and they'll be this morning, with us, talking to us. We also have a couple of MA students from the University of Nairobi, the two of them, and so on. And we have two doctoral students from the API itself. One is at the other end, Justus, and the other one is Dennis on the other end. So that's now the first crop of this particular initiative. And so two postdocs, two doctoral students who are ongoing, and two master students who are still ongoing. So the Center for Presidential Studies is a very ambitious initiative by myself and Ken Ombongi. And the reason is we've seen a lot of coups happen. And Americans and others introduce those kind of initiatives. Tell the presidents what they are going to do. And they also go to remove all the knowledge that this, like in Boston, what these presidents have done, they document and put them there. So that we can go and do research on our presidents on the American soil. It's a very good commercial project. So we decided we are going to study our own here. And we are going to document our own things. Why? Because the lessons of the past presidents, when they are doing, the presidents themselves do not repeat the mistakes of the others, unless they want to do so deliberately. Like we're seeing happening. There's some things that are happening which they are not good, but you think they worked at that time and they should work now. So it is basically to curate, and document lessons of presidents of the past in order to inform our future. And it is an ambitious project we have. We are not very keen on going to the public, but what we want to do is just to do the documentation and research. So this is the first initiative that we have, and we are studying the Moi era. And we are asking the question, what informed the Moi government? We are not talking about President Moi himself. We are not talking about individuals in the Moi government. We are talking about the ideas that drove the Moi regime. And the ideas might not be that Moi was aware of them. Might not be that there was anybody in his government who was driving those ideas. But those ideas have eventually ended affecting us as a people. And some of them have become very loved by some of our own because of our ideas. But the problem is nobody has put a finger on those ideas so that we can know whether they were good or bad. So this is simply a thought forum. And it's a thought forum and a thought project on the ideas that have been driving our governments. Obviously, why we chose the Moi government is it was not very different from Kenyatta government. The Moi government simply moved the Kenyatta government a notch higher. And there was a personal twist to it. But essentially, from an idea point of view, it was not very different. It was the same, it was a replica. And Moi had no illusions. He used to talk about Nyayo, the footsteps. You can talk about the personalities that he changed. That's where the differences come in, that Kenyatta had these differences and so on. So we are going to characterize that thing today because that's the purpose of today. But to sum it up is to say we created a Center for Presidential Studies at two levels. One is a forum for what we are doing based on the research that we have, and also participation at the University of Nairobi's Department of History in its forums, particularly seminars, based on what we are doing. So we have an entry point at the university to feed the university community with what we are doing at the center, at that center. Two, to be able to publish work that is coming from the center in terms of books and papers and so on, But there's that very, very important element, supporting research. So we are going to have an online archive of all available documents on past presidencies and even the ongoing. So if you can talk about the presidential center, it's more ambitious than the one they have in State House, where if somebody like Murumbi or even Jaramogi and others decide to deposit their records for research purposes, not for archival research, but for research purposes, we'll turn them online so that they can be available. But the center, the resource center is based at the University of Nairobi. Africa Policy Institute is a very private thing, so it can collapse any time. All things being equal. But the University of Nairobi is going to be there for eternity. As long as Kenya is there, the University of Nairobi will be there. So that's why we decided to have our resource center at the University of Nairobi. So what we are discussing today is basically the landing of that project. The landing of that project from this particular initiative which we have today, and which we are going to talk about as we move on. So allow me then to make the final point, and I call my brother Ken Ombongi on this. So when we sat down at the beginning to look at this project, to look at the project we want to have, and I had this idea when I called him. We used to be in KTN together, and after KTN we'd sit down and have a cup of tea. And we did this so many times. And one time I challenged him, I have an idea, and this is what I want to do. He said, oh, that's a brilliant idea, and Ken being Ken, he embraced the idea, and we had several other cups of tea over it in different places, and then it culminated from our debates about why our nation is going the way it is going. So can we start tracing where the first drop of rain started hitting us, and where could we start? So I told him, the partnership that I have liked in the academy is a partnership between John Lonsdale and Bruce Berman from the West. John Lonsdale and Bruce Berman wrote this famous book, The Unhappy Valley. And where did they get the ideas from? They got their ideas from the Happy Valley, which is the Wajohi Valley, all the way from Naivasha, touching part of Nanyuki, and the Nyeri was the capital of the Happy Valley. And those who have studied the Kenyan history of the colonial team will know that Kenya is where all the British aristocrats who had no manners or who did things that were contrary to the decency of the aristocracy were sent to Kenya, incidentally. And they congregated around Naivasha and the places I have mentioned, particularly Wajohi Valley. And they were at their peak between 1920 and 1935. By 1940, they had become such a disgrace to the monarchy that by the time the Mau Mau movement broke out, the British had already made their mind that they have to do something about this because it's embarrassing. The embarrassment came from 3 levels. One, you have these obnoxious stretches or swaths of land which you are not using and which you are not cultivating because you are every day on a 3-piece suit and with a pack of dogs on horseback. If you are not on your horseback, you are in a holiday with somebody else's wife, not your own. And therefore the greetings in Kenya at that time were, are you married or you live in Kenya? Because if you're married, it means if you are not married, then you're fair game for me. And if you're married and you're a woman and you live in Kenya, then you're also fair game. So being married was simply something you. So when you read the history of the Happy Valley set, that group, then you begin to see semblance. Now, the Happy Valley set had the characteristics that I've mentioned. You want a lot of land, so that when you go to the club, you know, you say how many acres you own. 2, you wanted to have power. So with whom are you related to in the monarchy? Who is your cousin? Who is your brother? Where did you have your lunch? No, we had our lunch in Paris. We met in London. We were in New York together. You know, that kind of club culture of power. Not just the political power, but this other power that is gotten from status and hierarchy and so on. The third thing was decadence. You drink, you smoke, you take any drug which is okay with you, and you have all these other promiscuities that have to do with sexual promiscuities. And these are documented. And the newest book on this came out in February this year. I was sharing it with Ken. It is still a subject of huge research, and it is feeding the film industry in America and Britain, and even Paris. So The White Mischief as a book is already, I think. So it's a culture that has emerged, and a culture that was not only influential in Kenya, but influential across the world. There are very many Americans, particularly the rich ones, who decided to make Kenya their home. You should not be surprised that one of the American presidents decided to come for holiday in Kenya. That tells you, yeah, Roosevelt. And it's not out of the ordinary. It's because of what sensation Kenya had become. So the argument that we want to make, we are making this book and the future, and we want to turn current studies on their head, is that the greatest legacy that the Kenya has inherited from British Empire, or the British Empire, is not the many things that Mamdani and others talk about, ethnicity, the race colonialism, and all that. It is basically the admiration and the copying of the Happy Valley, the culture of the Happy Valley, by the African elite. And I should have mentioned the fourth characteristic, because it is the most relevant to us today, over and above others: the love for violence. To deal with your enemies. You deal with your enemies in a violent way, not in a legal way. And that was very exceptional to the British culture of the legalism and the rule of law. So for them, violence was a solution. And that's why the cover of the document we'll be discussing today has two men who represented the two, the Happy Valley and the modern Kenya, and both went the same way. And when I've carried the interviews for this book with the people who are knowledgeable about cases of Ouko and others, the story is coming out the same. It's just the same. It's a little different, but it's the same. So the argument we are making is that the greatest legacy of the British colonialism in Kenya is the Happy Valley culture, which has become part and parcel of our public, fabric, our culture, our politics, our economy, and our thoughts. And it will have to be proven otherwise, and I'm sure as we get to the details, we are going to see that. So the idea of the post-colonial government is to recreate the colonial aristocracy, but this time round as ethnic aristocracies. Ken will tell you, because he's the one who is more eloquent in telling this, that the Kenyatta government created certain aristocracies that were clear. And the Moi's government's role was basically to replace those aristocracies with their own, and basically adjust them to their own particular issues within the Kalenjin community. Because the Kalenjin community has also its own internal divisions. These are the Nandis, these are the Tugens, these are the Kayos, these are the, so they just conditioned it to the hierarchy of power within the Kalenjin order of things. Kenyatta had also done the same conditioning them to the Kikuyu hierarchy of power. It is Gatundu, it is Kiambu, then it is the mainland Kikuyu, and then the Nakuru. And when you look at the personalities and everything, that's how they did. Then, of course, they built it on the architecture of the British colonial system, which they did not change. The provincial administration, the rules that were of detention, the military, and the police. But they maintained a deep culture of aristocracy. So these are ethnic aristocrats. And the culture of ethnic aristocracy is deepening. This is the worrying thing. It is not dissipating. It is not receding. It is basically deepening. That we have now more ethnic aristocrats. The only thing that has happened, particularly within the Kenyatta, the Kibaki, Kenyatta, Uhuru Kenyatta, and the Ruto issue, is an attempt to diversify it and to have an aristocracy that's not ethnically homogeneous. Because you have to co-opt some into the royal house. So there are very many people who are now being co-opted into houses. But the main idea is that of the Happy Valley. The British aristocrats now replaced by our ethnic aristocrats. And the behavior is the same. The quest for land, the quest for power, the dealing with the society like it is a property. Because despite our pronouncement, our constitution, the way the Ribro and all that, that's nonsense. The real hard culture, the reality of the British aristocratic culture, including the way we dress. That's why we chose these two gentlemen. One is in a bow tie, the one is in a tie. That's us. That's us. And therefore we have put that picture in front there purposefully to ask what is the connection between the two. And the moment you get the connection between the two, then you get also the paradox, because both of them fell to the bullets of the violent culture that had emerged at their time. So that is the way I thought we would start by provoking you here. It is not about the invention of ethnicity. It is not about the invention of colonialism. It is not colonial state. I mean, the modern state in Kenya. The Mudibe and other philosophers, what we call this Ghanaian philosopher in my mother's house, my father's house, and others, they are all talking about invention of this and this and this. The greatest invention in Kenya is not invention per se. It is the copying. And we're basing ourselves on one British scholar called David Carnadine. David Carnadine make a very cogent argument that all these things Marxists are talking about, that we are going to take the empire for wealth, that we are here to take the empire for this, and we want to, for the British, empire was an ornament. It is something that gives you status. You occupy land where the sun does not set. That quest for territory and the prestige that come with it that's what David Carnadine is arguing, that the British culture, a British empire, was an ornament, and the book is called Ornamentalism. Basically, a rebuttal of Edward Said's Orientalism. He's basically taking Edward Said. But the point here is that we need to come face to face with the fact that we are not pursuing any Kenyan ideals, or ideals informed by the morals and the values and ethics of our cultures, diverse as they might be, whether you're talking about the Nyanza, the Kushites, or you're talking about the Bantus, or you're talking about the Nilotes. These are not the cultures we are pursuing, the cultures of the cousins, no. We're pursuing the cultures of the Happy Valley. And the Happy Valley is our model. Should it be our model? That's the question we want to ask today, Professor Dominic Mwanja. Allow me to do one thing before I call in Ken to talk. We have two of our colleagues who have come here, and I would like Catherine, I would like to them to introduce themselves, Mukami need to tell us in detail what you're doing, because I said I'm teaching at the University of Nairobi, and I'm also at the Africa Policy Institute, and I also managed to say that I also teach at the University of Defense, Kenya, or the National Defense University, plus many other things I do, but yeah, take time, Peter. Bye.
Morning, colleagues. Sorry I'm late, but it's because this place is in the bush. And as I was coming, I thought we were invading a forest. So I was a bit scared. But I'm here. My name is Peter Wanyande. I've thought of investing in the scandal. So I've taught within the University of Nairobi in part of the political science. Came to visit 2 years ago. I'm now doing two things. One is working at the center, Shalom Center for Conflict Resolution and Reconciliation, directing research activities there. Is located in Karinde, so that's what I'm doing. The other thing I'm doing is that I'm actually writing a book. It's about the legitimity. So that is what I'm doing, and so I was very keen when my namesake here invited me to come and be part of this. I kept wondering, what is it all about? But I've now understood what it is about. Thank you very much. Yes.
Good morning. I'm sorry I'm late as well. I was trying to monitor the political situation because where I come from, it's a little bit interesting. My name is Stella Musioka. I am interested in global inclusion and social development. I wouldn't say I've started my PhD yet, but issues that happened in the US somehow affected me, and I'm still waiting to see what will happen next year. But nevertheless, I'm interested in topics that ensure or enhance social inclusion, especially for those who are at risk of poverty and at risk of social exclusion in matters that are in relation to national discourse. So I'm interested in diversity, I'm interested in people living with disability, and I always like to champion their voices wherever I am. Like when we were coming down here, I happened to ask one of them that what would happen if one of our participants is on a wheelchair, and has been an interesting discussion. Otherwise, I look forward to more discussion, and thank you for the invite, Dr. Ombongi. Santi.
For that, maybe to start on a lighter note, we traveled together as three Kenyans, coming from different dimensions, but we found ourselves in Dakar, Senegal. The three Kenyans were Peter Wanyande, Peter Nyang'nyongo, and Peter Kagwanja. Then one Senegalese asked me, "Is Peter a surname in Kenya?"
That is a good one. Thank you, Prof. Peter Kagwanja, and thank you, Professor Wanyande, my teacher. In fact, there are now two teachers of mine in this audience. Should begin to behave. Thanks, Prof, for being here with us. Professor taught me consistently in undergraduate, and we have been together until the other day. We are still together. We talk every so often. I said earlier, my other teacher is seated here, Dr. Muyandi. And thanks, Stella, is our colleague from Strathmore. Now, Professor Kagwanja actually said much of what the project is all about. I don't have to really repeat that. But let me begin by saying that it is not by accident that we are meeting in Karen. This place historically belonged to a lady called Karen Blixen. And Karen was part and parcel of the Happy Valley tales of, wealth, land, hunting, free life, governed by the morals of Christendom that the British pretended to belong to, ceremonies and all that you can think of. Our house is somewhere down this side. In them too, she had two lights at the gate, one green and another one red. When one was on, it sent a message to visitors. So there's one, if you came to the gate and found it's on, you went away. Maybe we will talk about that as we move on. The second thing is that it's not by accident, those of us who are here from the University of Nairobi. There is a sense in which the university is part of the history of the Happy Valley. In fact, one of the campuses which is connected to the main campus is Chiromo campus. Chiromo campus is located in the house of Lord Grogan. The two houses of Lord Grogan are still there. They are used as offices, built in 1911. Lord Grogan, one of the key players of the Happy Valley, who owned much of the land that we call Nairobi today, lived in Chiromo. And Chiromo is a name he came with from Zimbabwe. He came from a place called Chiromo in Zimbabwe. He came with a name and named that place Chiromo the way it is today. He used to host dinners. There's a river there. He will host evening dinners. And at some point he, I'm told, I don't know, I've never found the evidence to that effect, that he requested for the relocation of the railway slightly, not to make noise to him and his guests when they are hosting dinner in the evenings, where the University of Nairobi today sits. So it's not by accident. Number two, having said that, as a faculty and as a department, we came into this partnership with the African Policy Institute 2 years ago. It purely came as an accident. Professor Kagwanja and I used to be in the morning show on Wednesdays on KTN. And Prof, if you remember, I made a remark to the effect that in 2003, I went for the ASA meeting, the African Studies Association of America, in 2003 in Boston. One of the participants of this meeting then was President, who happens to have my name, President Kenneth Kaunda, President KK, if you remember. He was actually in residence in the University of Boston. They were there with the former president of Ghana, Jerry Rawlings, to give lectures to Americans on what they think about the African politics, African statecraft, and their administrations. And I wondered, aloud on TV, why we allow other people to do this, to tap into the knowledge of very important areas when we can do it. After that, that is when Prof mentioned, we are thinking about something, which is now what we are calling the Presidential History Center at the African Policy Institute. I said, we are ready for that. So we entered into this partnership, and Prof has mentioned the dimensions of it. But for us as a department, I'm no longer the chair now, Dr. Gona is, but we still continue to coordinate this. We have partnered with the African Policy Institute in a number of areas beyond, of course, this project. For those of us who were with us in the conference last year, we hosted the Mau Mau conference as a department, and the institute, API, that is the African Policy Institute, was one of the key sponsors of that conference then last year. Secondly, and then he mentioned it, this partnership has created a forum where our postdoc students do their works. We have a tradition in this country where you finish your PhD, and if you want to do some kind of postdoc work, you go to the global north to do it there. We said we can actually change that a little bit. Two of our PhD students in the department, who Dr. Mayandi knows very well, Justus Ondigi and David Neville Masika, who are joining us in just a bit, actually are doing their postdoc work within this project and in the institute. We also, he mentioned it, we partner in our regular seminars. Actually, the idea that is in this book, we have already presented it in our conference at the Department of History and Archaeology. That is the regular seminars that we have. If you go online, we have a YouTube channel. You can listen to the presentation of this paper by Professor Kagwanja and I. Finally, let me say, just in addition to what Prof mentioned, that our project, we have been grappling with a number of titles for this book. What we have now is Empires of the Mind, the rise of the Kenya's ethnic aristocracies and the Moi state. There are really three things we have been grappling with, and I think, friends, you can help us think through this. Number one is the moving away from what Mamdani, Ike have been talking about, the two publics, really, that the state in Africa is made up of the formal and the informal publics. And both influence statecraft in very fundamental ways. For us, we want to explore the intersection of ethnicity and power. And for example, during the Moi era, we seem to suggest that the Moi administration saw the rise of ethnic aristocracies that blended ethnicity, authority, and wealth in ways that resonates with the traditional British understanding of aristocracy, but it moves away from the trappings of wealth, land, hunting, and all the ceremonies that are associated with it, and it touches on ethnicity. In this case, the elites operate as both agents of community advancement and instruments of exclusion within the paradigm of patronage that is common in the African state. Then, number two, we explore the idea of the ethnicization of the state in Kenya, where we argue that the Moi period marked a shift where ethnic identity became a tool for accessing political influence, with loyalty to the president often surpassing allegiance to the nation, in that way reshaping the structure and the soul of the Kenyan state. And of course, finally, the intersection of tradition and modernity, where ethnic elites, adopted traditional identities to serve modern political ends, becoming literally intermediaries between ancestral memory and presidential favor, as it were. I'm sure we will have a chance to discuss more about this and get your advice on the direction we need to go. We are still at somewhere midway. What we have in this book are actually the initial ideas, and we hope to benefit from your thoughts here. And of course, I'm sure you will have a chance to read more and get back to us from this draft that we have produced. I think with that, Prof, thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You've now seen where we are coming from. I think I would say, Peter, this is one of the very few partnerships among African scholars, and we are doing it struggling because resources are not part of Africa's strength in terms of partnerships. But since we have consultancy, from time to time, we fare better but than the department in terms of the little we have for research. We may not have for everything else, but somehow, since we are dedicated to research, we do that. So this is one of the of those things that we're doing. I think from there, since we've done our introductions, let me again invite. Let's get to the sessions. Now, we have structured this program, and I think it's subject to general comment, just so for us to be able to finish. Because the main thing, Professor PLO, is basically to get our comments, so that we don't put into the public a book that is controversial for nothing. We have had too many dramas in this country, too many dramas. So we want something that can add value, so that when people read it, the way they read Google Thiong'os, because mind. Whether you're in literature, you're in law, you're in history, you're in sociology, wherever you are, or you're in theology, you can relate to that. You need to decolonize the mind. I would see this as a continuation of that if this project is as successful as we envisage it to be. And that's why we took this time to be here. We have also taken time and pain to publish the preliminary research that we have done, which is going to feed into now the book that we want to put out there. So everything here is temporary. Even though you hold that book and think it's such a nice, really done book in good shape, this is part of the game to condition my mind and that of Ken that we must produce a book. And the book must be better than what we have. So each one of you has a copy, I think, ahead of you, because we published just enough for us. The purpose of this book is for discussion. So it's not a book that we would want to sign off for you, because even as you can see, the introduction is still with us, because we do not want to get into the detail of the introduction, which Ken and I have been debating through and through. The book also has 2 chapters that are not here, and the 2 chapters are the one on that lady, what is her name, the one who was killed, Jury Ward. Jury Ward's chapter was done, but we didn't think the research met the cut, so we didn't want to include it here, just in case it falls into bad hands. And 2, we have Father Kaisa, who, again, the chapter was well done, but we think that there's more work that needed to be done in order to be included in this pantheon of chapters that at least meet the cut. So we're working on those two. They are done, but they are not as strong. The other thing is that these chapters will also be divided into parts, and therefore the parts that we intend to divide the chapters into are here. We have ethnic aristocracies, old and new. That would enable us to look at the time of the Kenyatta, how the idea of ethnic aristocrats came up. We have now the transformation of the Kenyatta ethnic aristocracy under Moi, the role of the coup, the 1988 coup. This is now no longer a myth or a theory. 1982, sorry. Yeah, 1982. The coup was not what we think about. The coup was deliberate. It was instigated by the regime in order to give it reason to change and to purge the two parts, to purge the Air Force particularly, in order to be able to do what they wanted. Now, there have been cases, there are cases in court. So some of the people have volunteered to us and given us all the files about this case and the petitions. And the payments are now being made by courts about the argument. I had told my boss, the general, that a coup is coming on Sunday. So whatever it is, the reason is it managed to help the regime that time, the Moi state that time, to change from the Kenyatta era to the Moi era. Then we moved to 1982 to 88, which is basically the consolidation of that ethnic aristocracy. The assumption is that there is homogeneity within that, or it's homogenized. But the idea was it is the realignment of Kalenjin power, the way it is constituted traditionally, in order to fit. So it's not a mistake that Biwott is with Moi as the royal servant, that Boynet is with Moi as the loyal servant, and you can mention others. Because the KO have always served as royal servants for the Tugen. And the Marakwet are the rebels, and so on and so forth. So there is that reorganization of the ethnic democracy to meet the tastes of the Kalenjin power. Prior to that, there is the Kenyatta power, which is organized around the Gatondo group. Those who know the story of J.M. Kariuki and why and how he met his death, some of it is in public. It is when the periphery of the tribe rebel against the core of the tribe. This is what you meet. So J.M. Kariuki's death was not a national issue. It was a village issue. It's how a Kenyan died. But the reason for which he died was basically that you are dealing with village matters. That you are not kowtowing to your seniors. Because that's how the Kikuyu politics was organized. It's Kiambu and the rest. And then within Kiambu, it is the core. And then there is the periphery. And the Gatondo group. And then the rest. So this is the group that in the Moi era is being dismantled. So you can see the choice of the Moi. There is no bias. Because the Moi era will enable us to see that transition. The original title of this project was the Moi transition. Chosen. We are still working on the exact title. But that period, 1982 to 1988, is the period. But the experiment did not work. So there is a fallout. And we begin to see from 1988 to 1992 the disintegration of the Kalenjin aristocracy. The fallout. And then we're going to see so many deaths. Jury ward, for the Kaiser, and finally the ethnic crashes. Now moves from violence targeting individuals to violence targeting groups. But it is the same project, let's say. So that's what we would call part one of the book, if you bring in the other part there. Then from, I think, there's this sub-part, but it is supposed to be part one, is the deaths in the high noon. And that's essentially what I've talked about. Let me move then to the democratization. How did the regime survive? I know David Thorpe and others celebrate the triumph of the regime in 1992. How did the regime triumph? But is it the regime that triumphed or the regime reorganized itself? So we want to see the reorganization of the Kalenjin aristocracy in order to meet the challenge of the multi-party democracy. Some people became scapegoats. Others were dismantled. So when you get like Andrew Morton's, the book about Moi, and so on, this is generally the case of scapegoating and whitewashing. Because somebody has to survive, because you don't want the regime to fall. So that re-engineering of the Kenyan state after multi-party democracy meant that there had to be a parallel reorganization of the Kalenjin aristocracy in order to meet the challenge of the time. And we see the birth of the Cushitic Alliance at that time, which is now being touted about the Cushitic Alliance, and the parallel response by the Bantu Alliance. So that space enables us to understand from 1994 the Kalenjins cannot rule by themselves because of the dynamics of the new multi-party. How then do you organize your community within that concept of ethnic aristocracy? So we see Moi's first attempt is basically to organize what they call in Kamatusa. So you bring Kalenjin together, the Masai, the Saburu, and the Turkana. But the numbers don't end up. Then you bring in something else called the Pastoral Alliance. Not necessarily a mega tribe, but an identity. Again, they did not. The numbers did not end. Why? Because you need to govern in parliament. You have to have seats. So you had to extend the Nirotic Alliance by going to Nile. The so-called what Bethel Ogot would call the G speakers. So they organized that, and that's the origin of the cooperation, the so-called cooperation, which is, I think, continuing to date. Now, with that kind of a thought, what does not come out is the reorganization of the idea of ethnic aristocracy. Now, who are the aristocrats? Because they are the barons, they are the top ones and the lower ones. Who are the top barons and who are the lower ones? This is the language that you begin to see. So the 2002 rebellion by Raila Odinga and the group is basically the rejection of a minor place in this aristocracy. And the rest is history we're going to talk about. So that democratization, the reorganization of the Kalenjin and the reorganization of the Kalenjin ethnic aristocracy is important. And then we have the expansion and fall of the aristocrats. So we are assuming that 2002 is the fall. Obviously, when the book is finished, we are going to get the criticism, and we accept it, that the aristocracy did not fall. It is simply retreated. But we don't want to go that way. We want to see that at least by 2002 December, the Kalenjin aristocracy accepted that it has lost power. And now there is a reorganization or attempt to revive the Kenyatta era aristocracy, which did not work. An attempt to reassert the power of the Kalenjin aristocracy after 2007, which did not work. And an attempt to reorganize the two, the Kikuyu aristocracy and the Kalenjin aristocracy under Uhuru Kenyatta, which worked for a while, but fell apart, and the Ruto rebellion, and finally, we today have the attempt to reorganize the Kalenjin aristocracy with the rules as the client and the Kalenjin as the patrons, which is again facing its headwinds. But that's not what we are going to document ourselves. We'll stop at 2002. Possibly in the future, one of our students, one of the people who come from this school, are going to help us see what we can do. So in short, that is the program we want to look at today, the issues. And we'll be led by those of our technical people who have worked with us, largely from API and Africa Policy Institute, because we use the two institutions to do the basic research. Much of the study you find here in this book is based on two things. One, a comprehensive review of existing literature on the subject, using what is available. We are lucky also, because of the internet, and other things. We are luckier than the older generations that we can access primary materials without necessarily leaving our workplace. And therefore, we have also been able to incorporate much of that. And I have, myself and Ken, have started doing some interviews. So we have done serious interviews with some of the people who are working on some of these issues. But we thought before we get there, let's get the fundamental questions where there are gaps. Because Kenya is, to an extent, over-researched. There's a lot of research on Kenya as a country, more than you have on Uganda, or you have on Ghana, or even South Africa. Kenya has been a model case for study, for obvious reasons, that we have been touted as a success. And at other times, as a country also going through very serious pains. And therefore, that has been the case. So we thought that if we go our way and now do the questionnaires and the way we do it at the university level, we'll need another 5 years. So what we need to do is to go for focused question. Peter Wanyande, this is how you are involved in this. The question is either 1 or 2. The one that are total competence. So part of this forum is basically an attempt to filter, the issues as they are, and to know who is best positioned to have a cup of tea with us on that matter, which touches on us. So it's another kind of, if you wish, innovative research methodology that enable us to get to everyone. We are also lucky because Kenyans, for the first time, have decided to write. There are more autobiographies and biographies, some done by individuals and others done by, through, help, which Kenyans are kind enough to acknowledge. Like if you wrote this book with Professor Kagwanja, then you say, this is my story, but I was helped to write it by Professor Kagwanja. My friend Kare Batemi and others have done a good job to help those who lived those times to document what they have done. I worked with Michuki, and I asked him why he has not published his autobiography, and why he's not willing to work with me to help him to write his autobiography. He had invited me to discuss him and the problems he was having with the media and misrepresentation. So I told him the best way to kill all these things is to publish your book so that people debate you. He told me, no, if I write everything that I know truthfully, I'm going to be at war with everybody. And if I write what I think I need to write, I'll be lying to the public because there's so much I will not have said it. So I don't want to go the way of Jenga Karume and from Chako to gold. That's what he told me. So I want you people, when I'm gone, write what you think and write freely. That's what he said. Obviously, there are some who have been courageous enough. I read Eliud Mahehu's autobiography, and I think it's one of the best. Why is it the best? Because he has spoken the truth as he knows it, without really pulling punches. But he did not publish it himself. He left for those left behind to publish it, and therefore it's published. So the point is, we have a lot of materials already in existence, so that we are not going to invent the wheel. So what we'll do is to basically harness all this literature to the point that we want to make. That for Kenya to move on, we need to discard the legacy of the Happy Valley. That immorality for going for land that you don't need, doing things that are not even decent to your children, seeking power without, without any morality around it, or what they call responsibility, which Winston Churchill called the prerogative of the harlot. Power without responsibility. That's what he said. It's the prerogative of the harlot. And that's what we are doing here. You know you are getting power, but you're not going to serve people. That you know. And why would you go to power for that? It's because you want power to serve you, not to serve the people who you are saying you want to serve. And if we achieve that, that would be great. So the way we are going to run the seminar today is essentially to have our experts give their comments. And we limit them because we want more discussion. We've had discussion among us ourselves. Masika, Justus, and others. We've had a lot of discussion. We meet every month, at least a major seminar, and we meet every week for minor discussions. So we've had a lot of discussion among ourselves. That's why we have this clarity of thought, because we've gone on it until we know what we're talking about. But essentially, we want to hear more from those that we invited. So we are going to keep it to the level of provocation. You're provoked enough to have something to debate with us. So that is essentially how we are going to do it. I am sure there's some who have just come, and maybe if it's okay, we can have a quick introduction, very quick, and then we can. Catherine, is the tea coming, or we can? It has come. It's coming, so we can have the first session. Very good. So we'll have the first session, and then we have a cup of tea, and then we move from there. So.
Good morning, everyone. Masika David from the University of Nairobi.
No, we expected you to say something more. Imagine you having a bio at the back of your book. What is it going to say? The brabs there. You're Masika from the University of Nairobi. You peel potatoes there. You're also responsible for cleaning boots or something like that. You know, whatever you do. That's that's what we are talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. I actually don't know what you want me to say now, but Masika is also working on this project, particularly the chapters on the Coup and cooperation, and we expect to hear more from the audience so that we can enrich those chapters. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Justus Ondigi from the Department of History and Archaeology, University of Nairobi. So I'm part of the team that has been putting this together. I was working on the Intra Kalenjin politics and also on the 1992 multi-party elections. So thank you for coming, and we are waiting for your views as well. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mbugwaganga. I'm the editor of the Nairobi Law Monthly, and I'm also a student, a master's student at the Aga Khan University, pursuing a degree in media leadership and innovation. I am also a published author with more than 20 titles, including about 5 or 6 biographies. My most recent book is Rigathi Gachagua and the Politics of Betrayal. It came out in January. But we are also working on another project about politics in the Rift Valley.
See, he's faster than us. Already we have Rigathi Gachagua book. Does it include the cousins? Doesn't include the Uzo. Yes, I know. But the second edition, I'm sure, is going to have the Uzos. So, with that, then let's start off. Just for the purpose of interest, then if you could give us 3 minutes, but because I've basically said about the things. We've gone over this because at the University of Nairobi, we gave a joint seminar, Ken and I, and we explored those thoughts. Ken has drafted the chapter that particular chapter 1, chapter 2, I mean in the introduction if you wish, which is essentially about that period. I think chapter 1 here in this book, chapter 1. And I have also done a lot. So it's not, we can talk the whole day, because it's very fascinating for us that we thought our greatest legacy is what the British left us, the Mau Mau, study all these things. We've never thought about the ideas, the movement of ideas from the colonizer to us, and how we have incubated those ideas and now they dominate us. We didn't have that. So Ken, if you could just summarize it for just to provoke the debate. Remember, it's really provoking the debate so that we can hear what others think about our thoughts.
Thank you very much, Professor Kagwanja. I'll look at briefly what we are calling chapter 1 here, Prof. Empires of land and empires of the mind, trying to conceptually frame what we are doing. But before that, I wanted to add, before Dr. Masika and Dr. Nyango, Justus, Ondigi joined us, I had mentioned that we framed this project in such a way that it provides an opportunity for our new PhD graduates to do their postdoc works in it. So we have the two very recent PhD holders 2 years ago doing their postdoc work in this, and I'm glad to have supervised both of them in their PhDs. So they are people we have come a long way with, and I can understand why David is shy to say many things, but he did a very good piece of work on the history of violence and land in Mount Elgon. And then Justus was looking at piracy in the Indian Ocean, mainly the Kenyan and the Somali coast, having basically that in the studies of piracy, we can talk about Somali piracy, which is uniquely Somali. And he did a very good piece of work and started already publishing some chapters from it. And David was focusing on the political economy of violence in Mount Elgon, trying to understand what he called the markets of violence in Western Kenya. So welcome. Friends, I have presented this chapter in many fora. This is one of them, to the point that I feel repeating myself too much. But what basically the chapter is all about is to try to conceptually frame the idea of this book. And we are taking a cue from David Canadian's work, ornamentalism, which looks at the British aristocracy that is based on class. And Canadian's book describes the British aristocracy in such a way that they are given to showing off, really, in ceremonies, formal and informal, what they are made of. Power, their connections to the British state and British royalty, what they own in terms of land and which class they are, and all that. But we are arguing in this book that in Kenya, really, the concept of aristocracy has not been applied in understanding the politics of the country. Partially because we always see our politics through the eyes of patronage and ethnicity. But then we fail to realize that this patronage and ethnicity is actually coached from the language, or from what I'm calling the grammar of the British understanding of aristocracy, where the British one is class-based, but ours is ethnic-based. And we say that, you know, we dramatize a lot about the concept of decoloniality, and also our leaders' sentiments against colonialism. But what we realize is that many of our leaders, from the ones we know, from Kenyatta to Moi and all that, they hated colonialism insofar as it prevented them to be at the center of quote-unquote sharing the cake of the state. As long as they were the ones doing it, the colonial structures were good and they were okay. So we look at the Kenyatta administration, for example. We, if you go to the subsection where we are dealing with Kenyatta 1, we talk about Kenyatta 1 because we have had Kenyatta's son as a president. So we are trying to get used that we had the Kenyatta administration 1 and the Kenyatta administration 2. That is Uhuru's, which is much more recent. Kenyatta's state was actually an elite ethnicity that he coached as statecraft. When you look at it fundamentally, Kenyatta stood at the center and ran an aristocratic state based on kinship, patronage, and what we see as the myth of anti-colonial heroism. Normally, in common literature, this is what we call the Kiambu Mafia. He created a group of men who mainly used the avenues of the state to acquire wealth in form of land. And this is not unique to us. We know who owned the land, who got access after we gained independence. There was one group of elites who were talking about redistribution, you know, and there was another group saying, don't affect the status quo the way they were. Let's transit. Let's not, you know, wreck the ship at this alley. The colonial state was good. The structures were okay. It's only that the Wasungus dominated it. Now we are in charge, and we are the people. So what Kenyatta did then is to centralize that power among a group of elites who were related to him. And we have gone into details describing who those were, which I don't want to go into. If you read page 8, you know, page 7, page 8, page 6 there, you find the descriptions of that. But then he would not actually survive without extending this through patronage to the rest of the country, where he recruited other aristocratic groups that came with the goodwill of their ethnic communities to bolster Kenyatta's state. These guys were used as henchmen from the rest of the country in order to support Kenyatta. But the ones at the center were actually his very close, neat, kinship cemented group, mainly from Kiambu. When Moi came in, this is what he wanted to undo by following the strategies that Kenyatta did. I've always said, and I mentioned this somewhere, that Moi came in from a point of weakness. That's what I deal with from page 9. Moi's empire, reinventing aristocracy without heritage. Implied in this is that Moi comes from a very tiny minority community, even among the Kalenjins, the Tugen. He lacked the quote-unquote the aristocratic credentials that men of the Kalenjin politicians, particularly those who came from the Nandi and the Kipsigis part of the Kalenjin community, had. So what he did is to try and rebuild his influence from that point of weakness in such a way that he recreated the Kenyatta state by replacing the Kenyatta ethnic aristocrats with his own. He was not very successful in the beginning. So what he started with is actually very populist programs that more or less maintained him in such a way that he survived up to 1982. You'll be surprised that among the interviews that we have conducted, I want to look for somewhere to read for you. Page 11. Let's go to page 11 of this document, of this draft. Paragraph 2. I'll read the whole of it. In the aftermath of the 1982 coup attempt, Daniel Arap Moi's response was not one of democratization, but of a strategic reordering of Kenya's political landscape. This period marked a pivotal moment in Moi's consolidation of power, wherein he sought to establish a new ethnic aristocracy rooted in the Rift Valley. The coup served as a catalyst for Moi to reconstitute the nation, using the crisis as an opportunity to dismantle the existing power structures and replace them with a system that favored his Kalenjin base. The alacrity and haste with which Moi moved to reshape the state and create a semblance of Kalenjin centrality in the post-1982 period somewhat invites conjecture that the coup itself, whether fully authentic or not, may have served or been crafted to provide the necessary pretext for radical reform and transformation aimed at ensuring his political survival. The interviews that we have conducted, which will remain anonymous for now, some of the very senior military officers seem to suggest that there is a way in which what we call the 1982 abortive coup was actually instigated. For example, the chief of the head of the military at the time, it so happened that the day the coup happened was in his home with the consent of the president. The head of the military, of the army, was also in his home with the consent of the president. They are asked to go because they don't do that if he doesn't permit them to do. It is also clear that the commander-in-chief had already been given information that there is some level of disquiet. But apparently there was some kind of tactical inaction, both on the part of the commander-in-chief and the top military brass. Look at the people who are leading the coup. Fairly junior officers, Ochuka, Oteyo, and others. And the day before, it is said, actually they had drunk. That's why most of the soldiers who came to the street that Sunday morning, most of them were drunk. You don't expect any serious soldier who is going to take over government to drink the whole night and walk out of the barracks very early in the morning to topple the government. But that is a subject for debate. But what we are arguing is that whatever the case may be, it provided a very good opportunity to Moi to reorganize his government through, one, crushing his opponents, co-opting those who cooperated, and scattering those who opposed. And what came out of that is Moi creating an aristocratic group based on his community. But the notion that we seem to also question is the idea that has always been put across, that Moi was in full control of what you could call the Kalenjin politics and the Kalenjin elite. Information is coming out that Moi was actually struggling to keep the Kalenjins together as one group to produce the kind of administration that Kenyatta had, which Kenyatta was able to do because of the advantage of age and also the advantage of having this ahura of mystery around him. Moi did not have that advantage. Otherwise, you realize that one of the greatest challenges that Moi faced is to control his power base, to enable him to create an equivalent of the Kiambu Mafia within the Rift Valley backyard. I think I will stop there. I don't want to say more about this. We will want to hear from our audience about this. Thank you very much, Prof.
So, I think with that, and given the remarks that we have made, which was being lengthy, and the discussion we've had, I would then open the floor for preliminary comments. We're going to be at this for much of the time, because we're going to get more provocation from the more detailed chapters from the authors. I am still waiting to hear the story of the chicken. The story of the chicken is how, I'm told, you're allowing me to give it. Nobody knew who killed Muge or how Muge died until the chicken came and perched on the person who killed Muge. And then the same chicken attended the funeral and refused to allow those who killed him to come near. We're coming across a lot of things that are not in the Kenyan public. Some are very hilarious, but they are part of what we are, because they are things that we believe that others in the West would just dismiss as irrelevant. Like, how do you find who killed who? If this is a top if this was done so well, and so on. So, and this, the same thing about Ouko, which is the question being asked. Did Ouko jump or he was pushed? Was he, was he killed by the Luo sub-aristocracy because he was powerful? And when you read Atemi's description of Hezekiah Oyugi and how every Luo, including Peter Oroalingo, even when you are not able to squat, you go on your belly. If you are not able to go, your knees can't allow you to go down. You have to find a way of going down. For Hezekiah Oyugi, so powerful, that's the image you get, a powerful person. And is this the group that did the job, or is it somebody else? Now, when you get those stories, somehow along the way, you get so many theories, and some are totally hilarious. We have decided not to discriminate against these theories, because we have gone through the records of the courts. And the records of the courts are very clear. The people you say, or that are said to have killed Ouko or seen him gone, may not necessarily be the people. But when their names are invoked because they have high profile, then they become. Then when you get to the stories from Luo Nyanza about what was happening around that time, then it's very interesting. So those are some of the things we are investigating. And with that, then why don't I give the floor? Yes.
I've just flipped through this. I'll give my very detailed comments in writing. Some of the things here I'm very familiar with. I was there when they were happening. I would, number one, want to see the role of the Law Society of Kenya included. In 1991, I'll be able to give you some of the advocate that we wrote in November of 1992. I was there in 1982. In fact, Adungosi was picked while I was standing with him. So I understand what was happening at that time. The molasses, I think I was involved in molasses. I'm the one who incorporated Kisumu Development Trust. I have a lot of material, perhaps more than anybody else. IPPG, the work that we did with the Misoi on movement for dialogue and non-violence, we took all the people to Naivasha. I'll be able to give you some material. I would also want on page 11 whether you are using the word nation and state as synonyms, or whether you are going to make a distinction between the nation. When you say Moi reconstituted the nation, do you mean the nation or the state? So those are some of the very preliminary things. And I will also want you to consider the use of the word democratization. Is a very unhappy word. and I would want to see you interrogate it a lot more, because democratization, and the political scientists are here, so I speak as a curious student rather than an expert. Do we mean democratization as articulated by the conceptual West? And what would you want to talk about in this regard? Youth for KANU 92. The other thing that I would want to see here, or as you consider rather than see, but when you talk about the Moi regime, the use of the politics of money and money bags, which comes in 1992 with Youth for KANU 92. Then the politics of musical chairs, which you see quite a bit during the Moi administration, and the weaponization of state institutions. I would want to see that perhaps discussed when we talk 1982 coup. And the Acumi report. The Acumi's report is very important because during the Acumi Commission, quite a number of things came out. You remember William Olent Mama's famous statement, lie low like an envelope, and I acted for Ntimama at the Acumi Commission. Our argument was that we never said lie low like an envelope, we said lie low like an antelope, and which has Maasai connotation. That report, I think, is also very important as you proceed. So those are some of the preliminary things that I would want to urge you to consider, because I've just flipped through the book, but I will sit down and share my very detailed thoughts in writing on some of the things. Ford, it's also important to note that my office was actually the first office of Ford Youth. So I also do have some very intimate information on Ford. So those are the things that I would want to say at this point, but I think this is very interesting. In fact, I'm wondering why you are limiting to 2002, given the time lapse. It would be absurd if you are to produce a book in the year 2026 and you stop at 2002. I think you should be bold enough to actually come up to 2025. The book would be richer. I know it will involve a lot more work, but I do not know. But 2002 to stop there in almost how many years later? Almost 20 years later, it would not be good. So consider that. Thank you very much. Those are my preliminary thoughts.
For that, those are very useful comments. Yes, I call Ambassador Dr. Kurgat or Coyote, and this is because when we were in Eldoret, that was our title, because we were known to be very hardworking, and then we know or Coyote, Koitarero up some way. So when I say or Coyote, that's what I mean.
Thank you very much, Chair. When I got your invitation about Moi transition and the been written about Moi, but when you explained to us this morning where you are coming from, very interesting. And I understand this to mean that we are dealing with the endurance of the British colonial state's legacy to us. So I have a suggestion for the title of this book to read The Rise of Kenya's Ethnic Aristocracies and Political Transitions in Kenya. As Professor put it, go to 2025. Because when you put there Moi State, it's too far. A lot has been written in articles, in books, and so forth. I also want to say that in these ethnic aristocracies, the Luo community played a big role at independence. Kenyatta and Odinga brings in the Luo Kikuyu alliance, and we have aristocrats there. Where do we put Mboya in this? And so forth. So just to, as you said, you know, when you read this book, it's like in Googies, you can approach it and understand it from all the. I think this question of aristocracies move to all groups that have been to power or aiming to go to power. And I also think that there must be a chapter on theories of political transitions as a start. You know, you have that because we have people who have majored in political transitions. So in that, then you come from the British aristocracy, then you go to the Kikuyu Luo aristocracy. We have Kenyatta somewhere, and then you have the Kalenjin Kikuyu aristocracy, and then there are bigger groups, the Luya, who have been in all this. I remember visiting one minister for education. His name was Otiende, and he was the first Kenya's minister for education. Maragoli. So they have been part. So how are they part of this? Through was it part of patronage? Was it part of being co-opted into the alliance to pacify their areas? And all this. That the Kenyan ethnic aristocrats, the ethnic-based coalition, ethnicity falls under class. If you are loyal and you don't have certain status, then they make wealth create status. So they are like that British aristocrats. The ethnic groups also are classified. Then in both Kenyatta and Moi, and maybe even it's a big role. For Kenyatta and Moi played a big role. Who the British mass that we had here connected to the British, then the American interests as a strategic location. How did that play? How did that play so that despite issues of democracy, they were maintained? I know of some people who are told, you know, for now we cannot deal with with certain people because they represent the interests of. And you must have read papers that even CIA identified Moi to be president. So at one point did they depart from there? They were already comfortable that the world has changed, the region has changed, something has changed. So that Cold War, West Bloc, the collapse of the Tsar, which assured the interests of the West that now there was no much danger, and the issue of multipartyism also did not just come like that. It was about the collapse of the Soviet Union and the threats of socialism and communism ending, and the Western liberalism brought in civil society and supported. So then we would link what Professor said all down. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for making us to start looking at the transition from Kenyatta to Moi in a more systematic way that starts to make sense from both a historical and cultural sense. A couple things that I have and I would like for you guys to look at. The generational psyche. If you look at the 1960s and 70s generation, it had a totally different psyche from the 80s and 90s generation. What I would like for you guys to do is to connect the generation of the 60s and 70s, that us, and how that got their leanings from the colonial pasts that our parents experienced, and some of us experienced part of that in the early 60s. And I remember when I was very young, after Tomboya was assassinated, I was pushed by my father and my brothers and everybody else to take an oath, and I did take an oath in 1969. And the oath was to protect the Kikuyus by any means necessary. So how did that kind of psyche benefit from the colonialism and the mentality during colonialism? Now, if you come back now to the Moi generation, what is the generational psyche that was prominent during Moi's time, but predated his presidency and was carried over? And then from there, what impact did Moi's rule for the 24 years have into the next generation coming now to the Kibaki generation? Because there's a transition on generational psyche on how they view governance and leadership in the next generation. And if you look at that, and I go back to what Professor Rumumbu was saying, we may as well go ahead and look up to where we are, because it's a continuum of generational psyches from one to the next, and it kind of shapes what happened in this generation. Then if you look at the Kibaki generation, for example, which are the millennials, and part of them is some of the problems we're having now with our millennials and Gen Z. That's a generational psyche from the Kibaki generation of independent young people that are creative. They are not listening to anybody because they grew up in a different generation, but they were informed by the previous generation. And I think that's something that we probably need to look at, what to import from one generation to the other in terms of that psyche. The other one is traditionalism versus modernity. And I think Dr. mentioned that when he was going through his chapters. And I think that you need to be bold here, because if you look at different traditions within the ethnic groups within the country, how does that collide with the modernity of running a modern government and a modern society? Such that if you look at that, and then the next generation of leaders coming from that era, we have a certain expectation that we'll be able to know. And you don't have, you probably be telling yourself, I don't want to be too ethnic here, but there's certain nuances that permeate into the leadership culture that comes from certain ethnical backgrounds. And I think those are important that we are able to look at informing in terms of where we are. The cultural dimension of leaders, I think that's extremely important. That finds its way in the political dynamics with the leadership from different ethnic groups that come into play. And I'll give you a good example. We say that the 2013-2018 split between Ruto and Uhuru. Was that a generation of psyche? They are in the same direction. Was it? That's why I go back to Professor Mumba when he said, yeah, Youth for Kano '92. How did the mentality of those young people who are involved and learned from the Moi generation come into the next phase of their leadership when they took over power in 2013 moving forward? Which goes back now the issue of constitutionalism and tradition. How do the different generations view both? And how does that translate in the type of leadership that we see with our leaders?
Gema. How does in organizations such as Gema, Luo Council of Elders, and all those ethnic formations which meet and discuss, and then you see the final product, and yet they are not in the forefront. I think that is also very important.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I like the thrust because the thrust is there's no significant difference between the British aristocrat and the ethnic that you're looking at. But I was looking at what's the role of the economic well-being, because if you look at Kenyatta team, most of those were people who had the money. And maybe that is why Moi could not be able to transit quickly because he didn't have resources and his team didn't have resources. So he took a bit of time to entrench. I'm also looking at the issue of a very significant happening. The change of, I think, what Professor is calling democratization, in quotes, the model that changed with Mrolongo, because it had a lot of repercussion. Then quickly, is there an assumption that with Moi, the Kenyattas fell? Because if you look at it, were enablers for Moi to settle the Jojo and others. But we look at the text, I think there's assumption that they fell off, so that we transited to Moi. Just like what maybe Professor felt, I also thought, if you look at the window of currency, it's very good. 2026, 2025, the literature is a bit maybe odd. And lastly, for those who are doing maybe doctoral, they may think about what we are calling the fourth and the fifth industrial revolution driven by technology. What does it mean with the same configuration? Is it a total fall of what we're talking about, or are we going to have new ones driven by technology? Maybe it's a thought for those who are going to take it forward.
Thank you. First is to thank everyone who has been involved in giving us the draft. I don't know, draft 1, 2, 10, I don't know. Not 0. It's more than 0. this is certainly better than a zero. When I was in the US one time, somebody told me it is easier to fix crap on paper than to fix a blank one. So this is easier to fix with all the comments that we have. So first, to thank everybody who has been involved. Number two is, as going through the papers quickly, not reading in any detail. Like I said, I was been out of, I wish I was there at the beginning. Why didn't you call me? Anyway, I was government. You not entertain me in talking about things like this. This is a better space to be. Yeah, looking at it quickly, one is we have oversimplified, very detailed. It's like we are writing to people who already know something. Okay? So if our leadership is going to be wider than ourselves, then we will need more details. But more importantly, let me look at that ethnic aristocracy. And I would want us to look at the role of formal education, Jomo, the schools, and all that, in creating, recreating, and even cementing and perpetuating this ethnic aristocracy. Who was the student number one in Alliance? None other than the brother of Kenyatta. And the story goes. Now, so if we look at who went to which school, well, you know, Kagwanja, you talked about the idea. Why would Kenyatta want the brother to be, because he was supposed to go there himself, but he refused. And he said, my brother goes. What was he seeing that we were not seeing? Is it his exposure in that place that he lived for 15 years that created education is something? And so if we could look at that, and as the book goes with the Moi and the rest of it, the schools and the choirs, Moi Tawala, Kenya Tawala, all these things add up into this ethnic, you know, they have already created a king, so to speak. Now, to begin with, as I was listening to Ken, and that setting, we need a little more, the colonial structure setting, so that anybody who did not live, and most of the people reading will not have lived at that time, during the colonial time, to know who was the chief and the rest of it. We need a clear setting of the colonial structure, so that when Kenyatta comes in, Kenyatta 1, he fits within a structure that is already known. And the structure is everything, political, economic, everything. So that when they come in now, we can see, when we see Moi as fitting there, what are we looking at? Assuming that we are not part of this story. You know, that's right for those others who do not know. And of course, that chapter should also have the methodology, so that we can have that feeling that this study was really done, and we can actually, it can stand the test of time, some kind of that. Now, we also need to look at the displeasure, the threats, whether real or imagined, within these aristocracies that helped in solidifying their existence. Because the reaction to those threats made them expand their boundary, whether that's why you have the Kamatusas and all these, to help them create a larger group by association, not even ethnicity. Some of them are those lawyers, the loyalists within the system that helped. So in the stamping their authority, in the midst of all these, what is happening, because it's not every day that people don't like, those who are outside would want to go in, and when everybody resists, then what we have is the other one has to assert themselves. These assertions were in themselves in solidifying that existence of that. I was born during the colonial time, grew up in post-colonial. When Kenyatta died in 1978, I remember I was in Form 6, and we were home. And I was excited. I don't know what excited me. I said, oh, the old man is dead. And my father looked at me like he wanted to swallow me alive. Do you know what you are talking about? What if these other take over power and they take us back to where we have just come from? I don't know who the other people are. He already was looking so bad on me. I did not proceed. Those days we were not asking parents what to do, so I allowed him to be. But he clearly, coming from Tharakanithi, having been in the Mau Mau, and now this state nation of theirs under Kenyatta, now Kenyatta has died, felt like he was naked. That is threat for himself. And of course he was trying to draw me in bed, and they didn't understand. I wasn't fighting. But it is this time that I realized that this Kikuyu thing is not just Kikuyu. That ethnicity is not Kikuyu. The cousins called the Mount Kenya side of the east, where I come from, Meru, now Tharakanithi. I don't even know what is the ethnic group I belong to. Belonged to the larger Kenyatta enclave and house and the Nyomba. That Nyomba Mombi was a little more than the actual Mombi house. My father was so just not amused that this thing is about to go, or it will go in, and he didn't understand what I was smiling at. So, for me it was a regime gone. So anyway, this is a very good write-up, I must say. If we changia, it's going to come out a very nice book for all of us to read, and it will be in that gap that has been created by so many stories about whether we know the East people. Even the Moi, we have written a lot about him, but how much of him do we know? Where was he hiding when I was in that year? I've seen many things. I was in Tadia during the coup, the last 2 weeks to the exams. But somehow Moi appears in the evening to say that to Tulie, from the maize plantation somewhere. So that kind of a discussion is very important to just know what do the actors, those in the military, those in the forces, know about what was to happen on the 1st of August on a Sunday morning. What did some of the students know? I did not know myself, but I guess a lot of others knew what was happening, and they participated. And we rose and rose on that scale. Anyway, so this is a very nice story. It is our story, actually. If you're not born in before 82, then it is a little bit history. But some of us lived it, and we know what Nairobi was like on that day. What we didn't know is the detail, which this book is going to give us. Okay, and I think this is a very good start. I'm excited to be. I hope I'll be part of this story when it's finally told. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I wish you had given us this document a little early so that we read and internalize what it is about. Our comments would have been much more useful. But having said that, I want to say that I'm actually excited about this new idea that about what Kenya inherited from the colonial system, colonial rule. I think it is innovative. I think it is something that will give us better understanding of our politics, not just during the Moi era, but even today. So I think it is an idea that you should actually develop. I had a few questions to ask. I don't want to make comments because I may say something that has already been said here and I'm not ready. But let me just ask a few questions. First of all, the title, the rise of Kenya's ethnic aristocracies and the Moi state. I know we are talking about the Moi state, but the impression being created here in this title is that these ethnic aristocracies emerged during the Moi era, which I don't think is quite correct. So we need to re-examine that. Secondly, I was just wondering, what has been the impact of the Moi era, the politics of Moi era, on subsequent politics in this country? I'm relating that to what they said about the period. Yes, you should go beyond 2002, and when you do that, you'll also be able to establish whether anything has changed or not changed, and if it has not changed, has it anything to do with the impact of the Moi politics? I'm also wondering, I believe myself that these politicians we have, right from Kenyatta time, they are birds of the same feather. They are birds of the same feather. So that these aristocrats, you'll find them in Lowland, you'll find them in Kikuyu land, you'll find them in Kalenjin, all over the place. Publicly, they may appear to be disagreeing, but in actual fact, they are basically promoting the same thing. So I think that should be my view. If it has not been well articulated in the draft here, you should think about that. I've also been wondering, this Moi, can you say he comes from, well, don't say it is true, small minorities and ethnic group together. Does this draft indicate, explain, how he came to power? I know he was a vice president and he took over for 3 months because of Syxsus and so on. But during the elections, after the 3 months, when he now took over as a president, how did he get those votes? How did he win? What were the dynamics? What were the factors? What were the issues that perhaps helped Moi win those elections if he won them? I was also wondering, what is it that has helped this country to consolidate this ethnic politics? I hope it comes out in this document. Yes, because we need to understand how come so many decades after independence, we still put a lot of emphasis on ethnic-based politics. Okay, so I think we need to think about that as well. I hope it comes out here. Yeah, for now, let me say that. I will read it and make formal comments.
Thank you. Thank you. Because of time, we wanted to get that kind of around to be able to discuss. We will not pretend that we will answer most of these questions. Huh? What's you? Yeah. The colleague there at the end. Let's get a comment from there, please. Sorry. Oh yeah. Thank
you very much. I'm feeling a little bit out of place in discussing because people present here, doctors and PhDs, and me here struggling, but I'm very, very interested let's say, in a multidisciplinary perspective. That's how I'll give my take. First of all, this is a very, very good job for us to try and understand where we are coming from, to inform us where we are going to. So I like an author called Yuval Noah. I'm sorry if I've quoted him elsewhere. So Yuval Noah is a historian. He's an Israeli, but he's written a book on, I think it's on his latest book. And he's brought about the background as we are moving into the age of AI. And he has also talked about the political unfoldings that were then there and are likely to unfold as we go forth. So I have two contribution. One is having the global view of, or rather a set. We came from somewhere. We came from, when I look at Julius Caesar's during that time, when democracy started being democracy, there was still what we are talking about today. If you go to St. Peter's, they think they were able to crucify St. Peter himself in a very inhumane way. That was then. That was the man of that time. Now we have a liberal man today who has gone through education but still behaves the same. So there's a question and there's a setting. So one was having that global view of politics, and two is what Professor Dominic has mentioned, the psychology, or what would maybe borrow from someone called an evolution psychologist, because politics does not happen in pieces of paper. It happens in the mind. So we want to understand, how does this man, if I was the president today, I asked myself, will I be the same? I don't think so. There is something that happens, and I think trying to settle and get answers has been something we call dark psychology. Dark psychology, where we use manipulation, persuasion, where we kill people, where we use threats. That's the only way I think man has found a way to assert power. So we need two experts here. One who has a global understanding and an evolution psychologist to help us understand. So I would suggest we also make it a little bit multidisciplinary. Thank you very much. Asante sana, good job.
Thank you. I am still urging to get us to have a cup of tea, because if we go beyond now, then the tea has to go back. So because after that we'll be having lunch, and I still think that we can get over some of the issues before we go for lunch. So I will not attempt to answer any of the questions or ask my colleagues to answer. What we can say is think about the theory, the dominant theory of continuities and discontinuities in things. That's where we are locating ourselves. That they talked about the French Revolution, and the more the French thought they were moving from the old regime to now the new world of liberté, égalité, fraternité, they were going back to that, and eventually they ended having a Napoleon. Now, for us, the more we thought we are fighting the British, the more we are really moving away from the evil of colonialism, the more we admired the order that they had put in place. Therefore, Professor Lumumba is right when he says that it was okay if the British go, but the system does not go. And it is us in that system. So it is more about inheriting rather than dismantling the system. And you can see the pains that are in the public now about dismantling the provincial administration. As the government side, as the government quote-unquote operative or thinker, during the constitution transition, there is nothing that gave me problem than the idea of the counties and their consequences on the provincial administration. I had to convene. The only meeting I convened for government officials, led by one Kememia, to make a case for the future of provincial administration within the new county system. And I don't think I convinced more than 50%. But the president was sworn to the constitution. So they didn't have a lot of choices. But even as we were fighting for the constitution, they were busy in offices crafting themselves into the future of the constitutional order. So what is the point? That the more we imagine ourselves as moving away from that which we hate, the more we continue to entrench it. So it's not about changing the system, it's about changing the monkeys in the forest. But the forest must remain the same. So we are here in 2025 in a thoroughly British forest of the Happy Valley, and us imagining ourselves as new monkeys in this forest. That's what is happening. So I want us to stop there